Well, we're back. Coalition Purple. Once again, this week has flown by.
Yep.
How's things happening your way?
Oh, pretty good. I fell off a ladder, hurt my foot, but other than that, pretty good.
Oh, man, it's scary. My brother-in-law fell off a ladder just a couple years ago. I mean, he was on a really high one, and he does a lot of home repair stuff and all that. I mean, he fell probably 15 feet, maybe.
Yeah, no, I only fell about 4.
And he totally screwed up his ankle, broke it. And he's just lucky he didn't die. I mean, ladders are dangerous.
Yeah, I was reaching over too far to, get some nails put into place, and the ladder went one way and I went the other, and that was that.
That's a weird feeling, isn't it? I've had that happen to me, where you start sliding or something, and it's like, not much I can do now.
Yeah, no recovery possibility. Hit the ground pretty hard, but as I say, survived. So hopefully I will be wiser in the future and be more cautious on the ladders.
Well, you've got some professionals in the house that hopefully is giving you some physical therapy and helping you through that process, right?
Yeah. No excuses for me.
All right. Anyways, well, I was one thing I did think of. We just put in our ballots. 2 days ago.
Yeah,
and it was a momentous occasion, at least for me, because one, I didn't vote for either one of the presidential candidates for the first time, and I wrote in Adam Kinzinger just for somebody. I think he's kind of an interesting guy. He seems to be pretty open-minded and is really kind of thinking in an independent way. And then I voted for the first independent, in fact, the only independent candidate I saw on the ballot and I won't mention names because I actually know the person's opponent, so I don't want him to get mad at me. But she actually listed independent for a local board here, and it was cool. I mean, it felt so good being able to, mark the little circle with an independent candidate. And we've kind of talked about this before. It is kind of such a weird psychological thing when you tell people you're an independent. It just sort of diffuses so many things and all of that. But it also gives you a thrill, at least for me, gave me a thrill actually to be able to mark that bubble for a change.
Yeah, well, as I say, it's a freeing experience because you're really voting your conscience. You're not voting along party lines or voting out of fear. You're voting for the person you actually think is best. And yeah, maybe they're not going to win. I mean, that happens. But half the country is going to vote for people who don't win. So
right, exactly,
that's the way it is.
It is. Well, at least at the presidential level, that's for sure. So, and again, here in California, it didn't really matter anyways, because Kamala's going to take California.
Yeah, we know which way it's going here in California.
Yeah. So it was to the chagrin of some people around me. It's like, I can't believe you're doing that. It's like, it's not going to hurt anything. So, you vote for who you think, you want to vote for. So that's all good.
Yeah. Just make sure you tell all those people who look at you kind of sideways when you do it to, listen to the podcast. Maybe they'll come around.
Right. Exactly. No, I do. I do mention it quite a bit. And and it's one of those things right now. That's why I think, hey, we just kind of focus a little bit right now on just, convincing people to try and at least start thinking about it. Because right now, there's so much white noise and, everybody's in a flurry over, election day, and you're not going to change any minds for the most part at this point. So it's really after the election where I'm excited to see what happens after the election, where we can really kind of put the pedal to the metal and say, okay, we got all that behind us. Now let's just breathe deep, open your mind, think about the possibilities. We got a couple years before the next midterms.
Right.
And really think about, hey, if you're really serious about and you're dissatisfied with the way the country's going, which I was walking by the TV just a second ago, and they had some poll out and it said 77% of the people were dissatisfied with the direction of the country.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so that means there's a lot of people on both sides that are dissatisfied. So it's like, hello,
Yeah. Well,
do
I'll be
something
honest.
about it.
When I start a conversation about third parties, that's always the first question that I would always ask anyone, and that is, are you completely satisfied with the way things are going? I mean, are you happy with your choices? Are you happy with the way the government is functioning? If you're happy with all that stuff, then great. You're just going to keep doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
and you're happy. But almost, if you ask that question to people, are you really satisfied? Do you really think the government is doing a good job? Do you really think we're on a good course? Almost everyone always says no. And then the next question simply becomes, well, how are you going to change it? You obviously can't change it by voting for the same people over and over again. So that's really the whole argument for new parties and for third parties, is that the real way that you throw away your vote is to continue the same decline that we're on. If you really want to vote for something, if you really want to have your vote matter, if you want to have a voice in what's going on, then you have to vote to change things. Because as long as people are secure in their positions and they feel like they can never lose, they'll never be responsive, they'll never do anything.
There's no incentive.
Right. You'll just get what
no
you get.
incentive. Yeah, no, I know. And and again, I know timing's everything. And right now everybody's just concerned about whoever their candidate is or whatever. So it's like, okay, whatever. But after November 5th, just breathe deep and really start thinking about this, and that's really what I think both of us have kind of hoped for with this podcast and all the other efforts that are going on out there where, hey, let's change this up a bit. And I mean, I think some of it is going to maybe happen depending on the outcome of this election. Some of it may happen anyways, because at least I'm hoping, maybe I'm being way too optimistic, probably that, if Trump loses, I think the Republican Party is going to have a big reckoning. If the Democrats lose, the Democrats are going to have a big reckoning, because it's like, basically they didn't have a primary and all the things associated with that, whether you agree or disagree with it, it is a fact.
Yeah.
And so both one or the other is probably going to come through a reckoning, and who knows what might come out of that.
Yeah, as they say, I think the aftermath of the election is going to be maybe the most important thing about the election.
Yeah.
Because one way or the other, people are going to have to start looking at how things have functioned. What happened in the election. How it all came to pass. Why it ended up the way it was, and then people are simply going to have to start making decisions based on the new reality. Because I think, honestly, after this election, there is going to be at least somewhat of a new reality, and we'll see what people make of it.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. I do get the sense people are finally getting to the point of being exhausted by the whole thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's hopefully a good sign. I mean, that could go either way. That could go, okay, I'm so exhausted, I'm just not even going to be involved at all. It's just a wasted effort and all that kind of stuff. Or hopefully it engages people to think about how they can. And the moment you give up and say we can't make a change, well, the country's over. If too many people do that, the country's over. And and that's not a partisan issue. That's just, if you're not involved some way, shape, or form, you're definitely part of the problem of what's going on in the country.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that actually, I was gonna bring up, and it's basically about the ballots, because I just picked a few things, because there wasn't a whole lot of candidates up for election in our area this time around.
Right. Yep.
There's more in. I'm actually still registered to vote in Los Angeles, so my ballot is different than yours. But I stole Linda's for a few minutes to check it out, so we can more or less be on the same page. But there are basically two offices that were being voted on. Hang on, I was gonna just look at it right here really quick. It's being slow. No, I'm looking at the wrong ballot again. Well, anyway, there were four candidates that I looked at: Joe McKenzie, Bill Hard, Alan Newsom, and Irma Sanchez. And as I say, I don't want to drop names or support anyone or get
right.
But anyway, basically, there's two candidates, each running for two different spots. One was for Vista Irrigation District, and the other one was for the supervisory board for some medical
Tri-City,
board. Tri-state. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So I went to look up all those people because I'd never heard of any of them. I mean, I see a
Right.
couple of signs around here and there. And so I went to look them all up. And what mostly I got was like their Instagram page or their Facebook page. No real answers about who these people were. It's all self promotion. And then when you look in the ballot, there's like a tiny autobiography that they put out. I'm so and
Right.
such a person, and I did this and that. One person was a nurse, another person was an administrator, different
Right.
things. But
Yep.
again, it's almost impossible to find real objective information on some of the down ballot candidates. And I know that we've talked a lot over the year, or a little bit
Yep.
more than a year now that we've been doing this podcast, about how important local elections are and how these small local elections have such a big impact on your life, maybe even more so than the big federal elections do.
Yep.
But the frustrating part about it is even though these elections are really important, finding good information on the candidates is virtually impossible.
It
And it's
is.
not like they're going to have a Vista irrigation district debate where you can turn out and
Right.
see the candidates. And then even if there is some kind of meet and greet somewhere, it's so far off your grid, something that you're so unlikely to even come across and know about. It's
Right.
like, how do you start to gather information about the people that you're going to vote for? And one of the things that a lot of people do is you vote down the ticket, right? So the Democrats say vote for all these people, the Republicans say vote for all these people.
Right.
And that's one of the things where for me the third party would be so important, and it would be an institution essentially to gather information in local areas and then be able to present not just a slate of people they think you should vote for, but sort of explaining why you'd want to vote for somebody. Because I always think that the why of things is so important. It's like, it's not just that this person is affiliated with one party or the other. He should have some position, some idea, some experience, some reason why voting for this person is better than something else. So I just think that if you had dedicated people, you could really create this party that had some resources. You could help, sort of explain some of these down ballot elections in local areas, and that could make a huge difference in people's lives. But it's just,
Absolutely.
it's so difficult to try and conceive of how you actually end up doing it. And as I say, that's one of the things that after this election is done, because I've been talking about starting my own political party for years.
Right.
And I've looked into it, and I know that it requires some fundraising, and I hate going on social media. It's just not my thing. But I think that that's one of the things that we can try and flesh out as time goes on. It's like there's so many reasons that having a new party would be such a good thing. But start to try and think about maybe how we could actually make it happen.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting that what you just said there is because I totally agree with everything you said, particularly for those, smaller. I say smaller. I shouldn't say smaller because the Vista irrigation district is actually quite large. Um, but it's a good example, and same way with the Tri-City Hospital District. It's quite large.
Yeah.
But it doesn't get the the press, the interest. The people have no clue. Half the time, most people don't even know they're part of these districts, right?
Yeah.
And yet they probably, to your point, have more sway in your day-to-day life. I mean, if you're worried about water rates going up or what they're going to be doing with infrastructure kinds of things, or you want a hospital that's well run and it's in the neighborhood, those are things that are going to impact you on a daily basis,
Yeah.
much more so than, some abstract thing that's happening at the federal level. So anyways, but it comes down to those tools of getting that information out there. And maybe that's where you start with the party. Maybe it's just being able to identify those sort of undiscovered important positions. And I think you've probably heard the facts more than I have, but there's something like, I may be wrong, I'll have to look this up, but somewhere I've heard somewhere along the lines of 70% of the elected offices in the country go uncontested.
Yeah.
Because they're small. They're these small, meaning they don't get much exposure activities, yet they have a huge impact. So maybe that's where to start. It's like when it comes to just number one, identifying what these opportunities are. And then number two, help provide the tools so people can actually get out there and explain, why do you want to be on the Vista Irrigation District? I don't know. I'm not part of that one because we're part of the city, but I know that's a huge, huge organization in terms of the impact they have, and same way with the hospital, and so, but people and it's like judges too. That's the other thing.
Right.
It's like you're voting for some municipal judge or something. It's like
no clue who the person is.
I have no clue who you are.
Yeah,
and that would be such a huge service.
Yeah,
and maybe it's and a lot of those things are not as partisan. It's like, there's probably not a big necessarily policy, be it Democrat or Republican, when it comes to the Vista Irrigation District. Maybe there is, I don't know, but I don't think there is. It's probably more of a pragmatic topic than a partisan topic. But might be a great place to start.
Yeah, as I say, it's just, if we could find a way to be somewhat more engaged in the local area, it would give us a springboard into bigger things as well. And so I'm just throwing that out there because I know that every election that I've ever voted in, there's been tons of offices with people running that I had just no idea about. And there's a little blurb in there as I say, in the voter guide, and I usually read that. But again, that's more or less just self-promotion. Anyone can sort of say anything about themselves. I don't think that there's
no fact checking or whatever.
Right, there's no real way to know. And even if it was a fact check, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily be able to trust the source of the fact check. And that's what I say. That's, if you have, it's kind of like the weight of the political party. If you have a political party that is pushing for certain ideas, trying to get certain policy done, it at least gives you a way to sort of understand the fact check that they're doing. If they're saying certain things in certain ways, it's like, okay, I understand why they have an emphasis on this. I understand why they're saying these things. Or you could understand why they might leave something out or be suspicious, or, it's enough of an organization out there that you could know enough about that you could say, okay, I can be critical when I look at what the party is saying. And that way I can be critical about, who it is that they're endorsing or why they might be endorsing them. And so, as I say, the power of the organization is to sort of, in a sense, be a truth teller. Right. And I just think that's so important now because, we have so little of it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and maybe it's this is a place where you can leverage kind of like the technology we're leveraging now too. It's like I would have, like on the Tri-City Hospital situation. I went and researched those. I knew one. Oop, I just spilled the beans. I knew one, and then I didn't know the other, but I went and researched the other one I didn't really know. And maybe it's a case where, at the local level, since they don't get much exposure, we invite those kind of candidates on the air here and just.
Yeah, for sure. I think we should do that.
And help us understand why do you care about the Tri-City Hospital, or why do you care about the Vista Irrigation District, and what are the issues that you see? And just because I'd much rather hear directly from the candidates in an unfiltered process, and just kind of hearing their attitude about stuff. You get so much more from hearing directly from them.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily going to bring this up on the podcast, but maybe outside of it. But I do think that if we're going to keep doing this, and I think we should, because I've enjoid it, and I think it's a fun thing, we should have an eye on, hey, the next time an election runs around, there's going to be all these offices. Let's invite them on. And if people, even if just getting a yes or a no to come on, that tells you something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it would help us in just self-serving and help us learn about the issues
Yeah, for
that
sure.
we don't
That's
know,
the thing,
right?
you know. And then we could share what
Uh,
we learn with other people, and we at
exactly.
least become a source of information for what could be going on out there.
Well, again, and I think the more unfiltered it is, the better. And uh, like I think you said last time, when it comes to freedom of speech, more is better.
Right.
More transparency is better. That's not to say we want to promote people that are just absolutely lying and all that kind of stuff. But the problem is it does become a subjective thing. I mean, back in my journalism days, at the end of the day, you still had to make a judgment. I personally, as a
Mhm.
reporter, had to make a judgment whether this person was telling the truth or not. And sometimes you got that wrong, whether they
Yeah.
were, it become, but so is it really dependent on, then you're depending on a third party to determine whether somebody's lying or not, rather than doing your own analysis of it. And usually, you kind of get a sense if you're really talking to somebody unfiltered. I mean, I think there is something to intuition and gut feeling and all that. I have no scientific proof of that, but I do think people have a sense for understanding what people are really about if they hear directly from them.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I learned as a physical therapist, and they actually teach you this in class because one of the things that you have to do is you have to do evaluations.
Right.
And if you ask a ton of really specific questions, especially if they have any kind of medical words in them or
Mm-hmm.
terms that people don't necessarily understand, you get very short, very sort of stilted answers. But if you start with sort of having a conversation with a person, they'll reveal what's really going on with them
Yeah.
and how they feel, what happened, but you have to give them a chance to talk and be comfortable. And I think sometimes all you really need to do for an interview to get to know somebody is be like, just explain what it is that you're running for, and then why
Yeah.
did you decide to run for it, and they'll give you the information that's pertinent for the most part, and you can just evaluate based on what they're saying. And if, like, sometimes you see with politicians and doing interviews, they have some sort of practice nonsense answer that they roll out over and over again. But in a format like our format, if we were just asking somebody questions and they started rolling out some weird answer, everybody could look at that and be like, what's going on with
Yeah,
this?
that
I mean,
does.
this guy's running for Vista Irrigation Board and he's giving me some sort of bizarre political answer. You can learn a lot about a
You can.
person and what they're doing if they just give a chance to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny too, because, uh, and don't judge me, but I watched the Kamala Harris town hall thing last night, which
Mm.
I'm sure you did not watch.
I did not watch.
but uh, but to your point, it's just like, again, I I have to start checking my mental capacity here, because I yell at the TV, and my wife's usually sitting there. It's like, and I don't disagree with a lot of sort of the premise of some of the things she talks about, but it's
Mm.
like it comes back to never answering the freaking question.
Yeah.
They'll ask a question, and that was just last night. I mean, all of them do it for the most part when they're in these kind of forums, which are very I mean, they're surreal. They're not real conversations, right? They
Right.
are so staged. It's such a performance. It's all become just theater. And and I mean, just time after time. It just happened to be last night, happened to be Kamala, but I've seen the same thing with Trump or
Oh
any
yeah.
number of people, right? And it's just like, just answer the freaking question. It's like it's either a yes or no question, or they go off on some tangent that's has nothing to do with it. And it's just like, that's the frustrating part. And if you're trying to reach allegedly the undecided voters out there,
Mm-hmm.
when they come to some of these questions, it's like, if I was an undecided voter listening to her last night, there would be nothing that would convince me that she was the right person, because she did not answer very specific questions about, so how are you going to deal with the immigration situation about the folks that are already here and stuff like that. And she was just going on and on about blah, 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 about, well, we need to, really support this, but we got to have a tough border, because she wants to make sure she doesn't want to offend anybody, that we're going to let people through on the border. It's like, they're asking you about, what about people here? Yeah. Forget the border, but they can never just answer the question. It just drives me nuts.
Yeah, that's one of those red flags that just, way back to being in college, when I was thinking about this stuff. And it just always occurred to me, if you have a position and you believe in your position,
yes,
and all these important issues, you figure people if you're in politics, you pretty much have to have a position.
Absolutely.
She has a position on what should happen to all the people who have recently entered this country illegally. But if you're afraid to say it, that means you know that your position is terrible. So why are you even holding that position? If you can't, if your positions are so bad that you're not willing to articulate them in public, well, then you need to go take some serious time to rethink your positions.
Well, and the thing of it is that they're doing it, and again, I'm focusing on her because she got to be the latest one, but they all do it. They're trying to create these sound bites where they're not offending anybody, and when you do that, you offend probably the most important people you're trying to reach, and those who are undecided. It's like, you're not giving me a straight answer. If you gave me a straight answer and I don't agree with it, I would at least respect that answer, that, hey, that's your position. And that would go miles, I think, with most people. It's like, hey, I may not necessarily agree with those specific facts, but if you give me a straight answer, that would just really build confidence in me that you were a straight shooter. That's why I was like with Adam Kinzinger when I voted for him. It's like, there's a lot of stuff he has said that I don't necessarily agree with, but he's a straight shooter. He says it is what it is in most cases where I've ever heard him talk. And I appreciate that. And it's like, 'cause you're never going to find the perfect candidate anyways. So I'm just looking for is authenticity anymore. It has nothing to do with politics anymore. It's just like, who's authentic? Who's actually taking a position and staying with the position and not being afraid to offend? I mean, one of the things I always learned in marketing was the day you try and market and not offend people, or you're trying to attract everybody, is when it just totally goes down the toilet, because you have to be something. You can't be everything, right?
But I think for
whatever reason, they've lost that in politics.
Yeah. I was going to say that one of the dangers that I think we experience as far as like preserving our democracy, if you have no articulable position on anything, then you're also not accountable for anything that happens. You just deny that it was you. It's like, well, I never said that. I never did it. Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, democracy basically works on accountability.
Absolutely.
If you have people in office that have done a bad job, you can replace them with people that hopefully will do a better job. But if literally nobody has a position on anything and it's just a bunch of nonsense, and you don't even really, in many respects, know who's running the country, then how is anybody accountable for things? I mean, it's just things going on within the bureaucracy that nobody's accountable for. That's where we are now, because that is one of the things that I think is actually a huge problem. Like, I think we've probably talked about this before, but if Biden is not capable of running for office, then is he capable of currently being the president? I mean, I think a lot of people out there would say that he's not capable of currently being the president right now. And many people also would say that he isn't the president right now. Other people are making those decisions for him. But what other people? What does it mean for us as a country when we can't look at the executive branch of our government and say, these are the people responsible for the decisions that are being made? And the fact that we, in many respects, don't know that right now is frankly terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think both of the big parties, this is going to sound like a conspiracy theory, and it may be, but I think they're intentionally now have gotten to the point where they want to keep everybody sort of confused, because that's a better way to manage things. Because the thing that really struck me that got me really confused lately was I was listening. I was listening to I can't remember. I think it was a rally Trump was doing, and he was just railing about how dumb it is that we're spending all this money trying to push electric vehicles and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, he's getting millions and millions of dollars from Elon Musk, and I'm going, wait a minute,
Big
how in
disconnect.
what world does this make any sense? And you can find other examples on the other side too, right? So
Oh yeah, totally.
it's like Kamala Harris last night was going on. They were asking her questions about, well, back in 2019, you were saying absolutely no fracking whatsoever. I'll never support it. And now she, of course, supports it. And it's
Right.
just like, in what world does this exist? So it's like, I think that's almost, I don't know if it's an intentional strategy, but it's one that's working to keep everybody very confused and where I think people are dissatisfied just because they really don't know where anybody stands on anything.
Well, one of the things that's always struck me over the years too is when people start talking about the economy, and all politicians do this, as I say, left, right, whatever. They all do it. Anything that's happening with the economy that's good, they say, that's me. I did that. Anything that with the economy is going bad, it's like, well, that's the other guy's fault. That was them, and we inherited that. And it's like, well, it can't be both. It's either you're responsible for the current economic situation or you're not responsible for the current economic situation. And if there is some reason why there's this bifurcation, you should be able to explain why. It's like, I'm responsible for good jobs because I passed a good jobs bill, and all the other stuff I didn't pass bills for, and that's the other guy's fault. And I didn't fix that, but it's their fault. But you should have some kind of explanation for it, not just a bunch of gobbledygook. It doesn't make any sense. Well, and again, as I say,
absolutely.
It's like
again, I think it comes back to the incentive part of stuff. It's like, if we could somehow magically get to the point where we incented people who ran for office, because I do appreciate and respect people who do it, because it's even at the higher levels. I mean, you do give up your life in so many ways, and so I do appreciate that piece of it. But if we could figure out somehow to magically, the incentive is getting stuff done in a positive way was how they got rewarded, versus this, let's make enemies with the other people, which is the incentive today. We'd be so much better off. And again, that's where I think a third party could be that leverage point, that pivot point that would start forcing and getting to that point where we're measuring people based on what they do, not what they say.
Yes.
And because that doesn't really exist today, to your point, so they all make up what they want to make up in terms of what's been a success or not a success.
Yeah.
So anyways, well, and another 30 minutes just flew by.
Yeah, I'm amazed. I can't believe that was 30 minutes.
But I think I'm more excited than ever about where we could take the podcast after the election.
Yeah.
And because I think we could really, I think it probably took us just a year just to kind of figure out what we're doing and how to do it and how it all works. So now as we get past the election, we can really kind of start, taking some more actionable steps and things to help take more actionable steps and things to move this crazy process forward, to get some third parties going.
Yeah, no, as I say, I think it'll be great. One interview that we absolutely should do is we should find somebody who knows something about creating a political party and interview them so that we could know how to start. Completely self-serving interview. It's like, explain to me now how I'm supposed to get this all to work. Thanks.
No, I think that's a great idea. The other thought I have too is, and I have one person in mind, actually, I was thinking about this the other day, is to talk to a local politician who is no longer running for something, and tell us the reality of what it is and why at a local level you're kind of trying to make these things partisan when really a lot of the local stuff is not partisan in my mind. It's not a Republican Democrat thing, and I think this person might be willing to do that. And so there's just so many things I think we could learn just to get the conversation going out there that this is a doable thing. And if we all don't get demoralized depending on the outcome of the election, depending on what side you fall on,
Yeah.
and try and move things forward.
Yeah, no, I think having a positive message, especially
Yes.
coming out of this election, would be very good. And as I say, I don't know how many people will reach, but there's going to be a lot of people out there, one way or the other, that are going to need a boost.
Absolutely. Guaranteed.
Yep.
Yep. So, all right. Well, we'll end it there for now, and then we'll catch you next week.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you again, and I'll see you next week.
Yep.
Bye.